Hello, beautiful beings, and welcome to the podcast episode of today. This is your Do You Fucking Mind episode, and it is all about how to move on or how to overcome the fear of disappointing other people. Because I feel like us thinking about, oh my God, my parents are going to be disappointed, my partner's going to be disappointed, these people are going to be disappointed, my hometown is going to be disappointed, it stops you from either taking action on certain things, from doing certain things, but more importantly than that, it actually forces you to lead a life that is not at all within your control. I think a lot of the reason why people are not satisfied with their life is because they feel like they don't really have control over their life, whether it be financially, whether it be emotionally, whether it be in the direction of their life, whether they feel stuck in a relationship where there's a power dynamic. I genuinely feel that there's many sources of unhappiness, but the two main sources is loneliness and feeling like you do not have control over your life circumstances. So that is what we're going to be talking about today as far as disappointing other people. We're going to talk about good disappointment and what that can teach us. We're going to talk about bad disappointment and how to navigate that in a way that doesn't control our life, okay? You're going to take the reins back. You're going to take control back. You're going to be able to deal with people being disappointed, but still proceed with what it is that you want to do without disrespecting people. It's going to be a very, very, very productive episode for those of you that struggle with this kind of fear that holds you back. Now, I thought I'd do a brain fact on death cap mushrooms. Now, this is quite random for those of you that are not playing along at home in Australia. I know that, just fun fact, Australia accounts for only around 50% of my audience. So I've got a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are not in Australia. And the reason I'm saying that is because currently in Australia, there is this very big trial, like a court case trial going on. It actually just got, the verdict just came in, about this woman who poisoned 4 other people with a meal that she cooked, and she put death cap mushrooms in this meal. And the reason I'm saying she put is because the verdict came in, she has been found guilty, so it's not even alleged. It's also, you hear her defense and it's fucking crock of shit. This woman's anyway, I'm not even gonna, whatever. But she poisoned 4 people, 3 of them died, and 1 of them was severely, severely, severely unwell from this poisoning. And the mushrooms that she used are called death cap mushrooms. Now, this has been all over the news in Australia. There's podcasts about it, like the Mushroom Cook, I think it's called. There's a podcast. There's many podcasts. So if you guys are interested, whether you're Australian or not, it's a very full-on story and quite an interesting one to read into. So I thought, why don't we talk about what it is about the death cap mushroom that causes people to die, right? So these mushrooms, death cap mushroom, they're also known as Amanita phalloides, okay? There's always going to be some scientific name to fucking everything. And they are one of the most poisonous mushrooms that one can consume, okay? They are responsible for the majority of fatal cases in humans when it comes to mushroom poisoning. One article I found was around 90% of fatalities due to mushroom poisoning is due to this particular mushroom, okay? Now, we're talking about what makes this mushroom so fucking toxic and what is the mechanism of action in a nutshell without getting too complicated. So these mushrooms contain 3 main toxin groups, okay? Amatoxins, phallotoxins, and virotoxins. And in this case, it appears, based on the studies and based on what what pharmacists and pharmacologists have looked into, it appears that the amatoxin is the toxin that's primarily responsible for these really terrible effects on humans. And just as you don't even have to take that much of the mushroom. It's quite a potent toxin. 30 grams of the mushrooms, just 30 grams is enough to kill somebody, okay? Now, like I said, there's many things at play here. There's multiple toxins at play, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but I am talking about this particular amatoxin. We're going to delve into that one because that's the one that seems to be the toxin of primary importance or interest in this scenario. Now, there's this within the amatoxin, there's this thing called alpha-amanitin, okay? And that's kind of the key basically the key component that we're looking at of how it affects the human body. So this alpha amanitin, what it does is it inhibits an enzyme, okay? Very basic, but it inhibits an enzyme called RNA polymerase 2. Now, when you inhibit this enzyme, it causes these like protein deficits. So that way the cells are not able to carry out their normal functions, such as creating proteins. If a cell cannot create the proteins that it is supposed to create, it leads to cell death. If a cell is stopped from doing what it's supposed to do, it will die. Okay, whether it's programmed to die because the body is like, you're no longer useful, you're going to die, whether it becomes toxic within itself, whether the organelles cause it to shut down. There's many reasons, but if a cell is stopped from doing what it's supposed to be doing, the chances of that cell dying is very, very high. And this is what's happening. It leads to cell death. And the organ that's targeted here in this whole system is primarily the liver, but also the kidneys. And then you've got all these secondary organs that are targeted as well with this toxin. So once the mushroom is consumed, the person doesn't really display symptoms for several hours, like 6 to 12 hours, depending how much of the mushroom is consumed. If you consume a lot of it, the symptoms appear a bit earlier, not as much, they appear a bit later, but it's still hours, okay? So nausea, vomiting, diarrhea from like 6 to 12 hours after ingestion. And then after that, seizures, coma, death, okay? Now, the mortality rate of these mushrooms is between 10 to 30%, but that also is dependent on how much of this toxin has been consumed. So someone can survive the poisoning if they haven't had too big a dose, but if you have had a massive dose and you're not aware that you had the dose, therefore you weren't able to intervene or intercept in the primary, like first few hours after ingesting that thing, then I would imagine that the mortality rate would be a lot higher than just the 10 to 30%. Now, toxicity is not reduced by cooking or drying. Now, this woman in the mushroom murder trials, she like dehydrated these mushrooms so she could like shrink them down and put them in like what was it that she made, Shania? Beef Wellington? Yes. Yeah, she fucking cooked a beef Wellington and anyway, hectic. So basically what happens, this fucking mushroom gets absorbed through the lining of the GI tract and then it makes its way to the liver. And then obviously this toxin inhibits the enzyme, which inhibits the cell to create proteins. Then that cell is they're all programmed to die relatively quickly. And that's where like the major problems begin. Then it starts to affect other organs, which then also begin to shut down. After a few days, the liver fails, the kidney fails, and then we get something called encephalopathy, and then death. So this encephalopathy, it's called hepatic encephalopathy, which is basically an altered level of consciousness within the brain due to liver failure. And that's what causes the coma and then the death as well as many other factors. And the reason for this is that toxins or just particles within the blood that normally would be filtered out by the liver and by the kidneys, that's not happening. So then it's becoming toxic to the brain. And what we're seeing is, this change of consciousness and then eventually a coma. Now, the underlying condition is thought to be a buildup of ammonia, which is normally removed by the liver, but there's also a whole bunch of other substances that the liver should be filtering out, but it's not able to because this enzyme has been inhibited, the proteins aren't being made, and then everything's failing. Now, the hectic thing about all of this is that it is basically, as far as we know, pretty much irreversible, okay? So the antidote to death cap mushrooms is a compound, there's a couple, but I'm going to mention the one that was mentioned the most in the literature, is one that's called silibinin, S-I-L-I-B-I-N-I-N, if you want to look it up, silibinin. I don't know how to pronounce that. But it basically works by competing at the binding site of the receptor in the liver that alpha amanitin binds to, okay? So I think I'm going to need to do a brain fact all about different binding, where we've got covalent bonds and, reversible bonds, irreversible bonds. But basically, when we're talking about a chemical bond, certain things that bind to receptor sites are going to be irreversible, which means that that bond is now bound until the cell turns over pretty much. So you cannot break that bond. It just like ends up getting released once the cell turns over. Or there's bonds where things can bind to a receptor site, but then another chemical agent can come and knock that off the site so it can like kind of like compete at the binding site. What's happening here is this one particular antidote, this silibinin, right, can work by competitively binding to the same receptor site, but it won't knock off this alpha amanitin that it binds to. If alpha amanitin has already been bound, this antagonist is not going to knock it off. So that's the scary thing. So in other words, the only way to really, hopefully the only proper antidote, as far as we know to an extent, they're researching a bunch of other things as well, is to intercept it as early as possible. But you would have to know that you consumed this mushroom. If you know that you consumed this mushroom, you could go to a hospital, you could, try and get this antidote, ingest it, block as many of the receptor sites as possible, so that way you're getting very minimal effects, very minimal damage to the liver, and then you can recover, okay? But like I said, this antagonist it's only effective if it's administered before the toxin starts to bind to most of the cells, because it is an irreversible bind. Once it's bound, it's not gonna fucking unbind. So that is why death cap mushrooms are so fucking dangerous. Cool. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the case, then just look up on wherever you listen to your podcast, look up the mushroom murder trials or the mushroom cook or something, because it's a very interesting story. It's really fucked up. Now, let's get straight into the podcast topic of the day, which is about disappointing others. And we're going to break down what disappointing other people kind of means for us, why it's our greatest fear, why it's the strongest thing that holds us back in life. And I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to really equip you with some psychological tools that you leave this episode feeling so fucking empowered, and also not looking at the fear of disappointing other people as like, I don't give a fuck about disappointing other people. You end up having a very fair and rational approach to what disappointing someone looks like, okay? Now, the first thing, number one, that we're going to go through, there's a whole bunch of points, I love it. I love a list, is it is normal to care what the next cunt next to you thinks about you. That's normal, okay? So don't be like, oh, I wish I didn't care. I just want to be someone that doesn't care what people think. Even people that seem quite carefree and that really go to the beat of their own drum, they might still care what other people think. The problem here is, what are you doing about that care about what other people think? Because I care what other people think about me, but do I let it rule my life? That's the question. So don't think the only time it's going to be okay is if I don't give a fuck what other people think about me, because that's relatively unrealistic, because we are wired to want to form a close community, a close bond to people. And due to that, we have these social kind of structures built into our psyche that forces us to care what the people around us think. Otherwise, we would burn every fucking bridge under the sun. No one would want to hang around us if we didn't have insight into how other people felt about our actions and our behaviors, right? So it is normal to care. Now, the aim is to just not get to a point where obviously you don't care enough, that makes you inhumane, but also to get to a point where you're like, I can acknowledge that I care. What am I going to do about it now? Versus I'm having this visceral reaction. I need to stop doing what I'm doing because I need to have this person like me in order for me to like myself. Notice the difference there, okay? Number two, let's talk about the psychology behind it, because there's several things that play a role in people that care so much that it controls their actions, and people that are able to take on board when someone is disappointed in them, but still proceed with what they were going to do. The first one is high achievers. Not everyone, but a lot of high achievers tie their identity to their achievements. And when your entire identity is based around your achievements, then the fear of disappointing other people can actually be quite large. And a lot of people would be thinking, oh, but a high achiever, they're probably really driven, they're probably quite intelligent, they're probably whatever. Yes, all those things are true, or they might be true, but it still doesn't take away the fact that somebody who is a high achiever, where that becomes their identity, then would really struggle to think, well, what if I don't want a really intellectually demanding job? What if I don't want to do that? All these people are going to be disappointed in them. Everyone has, when someone's got a standard of behaving or operating, the people around them, well-meaning people, will hold them to that standard and will expect great things from them. So high achievers really do struggle with the fear of disappointing other people. People with low self-esteem, where they always get their validation and their sense of security from everyone else around them, and they struggle to provide even a semblance of that for themselves, they are also going to struggle with the fear of disappointing others, because instead of rationally looking like, oh, I've disappointed my parents, it's okay, we're looking at this thing differently, we still love each other, this will be a thing in the past later on, it'll be fine. They look at it as, if my parents are disappointed in me, they don't accept me, okay? Big difference. Then we've got people who have had a sheltered upbringing, basically where it was super sheltered. Things were done for them. They weren't encouraged to go out on their own and learn how to make a mistake, learn how to fail, learn how to pick themselves up after that. Just basically learn how to be knocked down and get back up in life. People that were raised in a way where that was just not possible and everything was handed to them and everything was given to them, they find it really difficult to practice decision-making independently, okay? A lot of the fear of disappointing other people comes down to how comfortable are you making a decision independently. If you are sheltered, you're likely going to find it very difficult to have these independent decisions, and therefore you're going to need all these other people's input. Because if you're like, I've never been taught how to practice decision-making for myself and learn the repercussions of a bad decision versus a good decision and learn how to deal with these repercussions, then, if I've never learnt that, then when I'm out in the big world as an adult, it's going to be terrifying, right? So therefore, I'm going to continue to turn to my parents or turn to my community or my family or my church or whoever to get the approval. And then if I now turn around and say, I really want to do something different with my life, how the fuck am I going to be able to do that if these people don't agree? So therefore, I'm not going to do it, because unless they agree, I'm not going to be able to do it. And then, of course, people that really fear regret and fear people saying, I told you so. If you're someone that really fears someone saying, I told you so, then that comes down to the fact that you put all your validation in the hands of other people. Because no one likes to be told, I told you so. Also, people that say, I told you so, can get fucked as far as I'm concerned. The amount of times I think in my head, oh, I told you so, but I would never say it. It's like, we're all adults here. We're not fucking morons. We all are aware when we've made a bad decision. So those clowns are like to sit on their fucking high horse and be like, oh, I told you, I knew this would happen. I knew that this relationship wouldn't work out. No, you didn't, cunt. You can say that now in hindsight because this is the outcome. But did you know? Yeah, you might have presumed or imagined or thought possibly, but you don't know. You don't have a crystal ball. And also, it's my fucking life, so I don't care what you thought. Sorry about the rant, but it just pisses me off when people say, I told you so, because it's so disrespectful and unnecessary, because it's so easy when it's not your life and you're not having to make the decisions to stand there and say, oh, I imagined a scenario where this wouldn't work out for you while I'm sitting here comfortably at home. So I would never fear someone saying, I told you so, because if someone's saying, I told you so, they are emotionally inept individuals. Other reasons are, you might be someone who always wants to be in control of everything. So if you always need to be in control of everything, then that is going to include outcomes of people's reactions, right? So people that, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, people that don't have a semblance of control over their lives are more likely to try and control everything else outside of them. So outcomes, people liking them, people, doing it so people pleasers, for example, they might not be satisfied with their life and everything that they're doing, but they'll try and control the outcome of a lot of things. Or even unhealthy individuals who will try and control their partners because they themselves don't have a real grasp of happiness in their life, okay? So that's another reason. If you think, I can't do this because I'm not in control of how this person reacts, and they're going to react negatively to me making this decision, and then I'm going to disappoint them, blah, 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 okay? People that chase approval and also avoid conflict. That's an obvious one. So those are the main reasons. Now, I'm going to cover 2 kinds of disappointment in this next point 3. 2 kinds of disappointment, because it's really important to know the 2 and how we're going to break them down. Number 1, there is fair disappointment, okay? So fair disappointment is when you have actually done something that is out of character and someone is rightfully surprised to be let down by you and be disappointed by you. So this is a concept that I have covered recently. So I don't need to go in depth about it if you're an avid listener of the podcast. But basically, this is the kind of disappointment where it's important to listen. This is what strengthens our social muscle, okay? So if you know that you did something out of character, let's say you lied, and you're not a liar normally, but let's say you lied. And then someone's like, I'm disappointed in you because you lied to me and we've got such a trusting relationship. I just don't see the need for you to lie. Even if it was a small lie, I don't know why you did that because our relationship is so honest and open. That is fair. And that's when you need to listen. That's a good disappointment. That's a kind of check yourself before you wreck yourself. You're breaking out of this really good character that you have. For what? You know, it allows you to pause. It allows you to feel healthy guilt. Healthy guilt is when you know you've done something wrong. It goes against your character or your morals or both. And you're able to be like, oh, God, I don't like making a person feel like that. God, I don't like creating cracks in a relationship. For what? I don't like someone now not knowing if they can trust me because I did something stupid. Very healthy. So this is really good. So when someone says they're disappointed in you, ask yourself, is this fair disappointment? And the real key to know if it's fair or not is, did I break character and do something that genuinely was a surprise to them because it was so out of character for me to do it, and it's something that hurt the other person? Okay, so another example is like when you really promise to do something but you don't follow through, then they can be disappointed in you. Like the amount of people that promise things and then they don't follow through, and then someone gets disappointed. They're like, well, I was too busy, I was too this, I was too that. Then don't promise. It's not that hard. Like, just be a person of your word, even if that means that your word is 10% of what it used to be. Who cares? But just if you're going to promise, stick to your fucking word. Otherwise, don't commit. It's not that hard. And like, that's something I've learned as well in my time. I would much rather, as much as I want to please someone in the moment and say, yeah, I promise I'm going to get this done, I promise, I would much rather say, I'm going to do my best. Let's see how we go. I can't promise anything yet. Versus when I do promise something, I know I'm going to follow through, okay? So how can you become a person of your word? Stop promising shit you can't follow through with. And then people are not going to be that disappointed in you. Another thing would be if you've got a really close friendship and then for whatever reason when they really needed you, you just weren't really paying attention. You weren't giving your friend the time of day. You weren't being a good friend, kind of preempting their needs and being for them in the hour of need. Or, for example, you've always been a really loving, caring person with your family and with your friends, and one day you are like behaving like a fucking pork chop, being rude, being a dickhead, and people are like, whoa, what has come over you? We're very disappointed in your behavior today. So that's fair disappointment. It's basically when you've set yourself up and then you've gone against your word, you've gone and failed your word, and then people are like, what the fuck? So that's very fair. That's normal. It's a great learning curve. It teaches us a lot about our social kind of interactions with other people. This is really good. Fair disappointment. This is very easy to overcome. You ask yourself, is it real? As in, is it actually going against what I was supposed to be? Did I actually lie? Did I actually let this person down? Am I being called out for something legitimate? Can I agree with this thing that I'm being called out for? If it's fair, it's probably going to be, yeah, you can agree. Once I can put my pride aside, like, can I see it from their point of view? And normally you can. And then you ask yourself, am I able to now apologize, acknowledge the pain or the confusion that I caused? And can I move on from this in a productive way? Okay? So those are the steps that you deal with. Those are the questions that you ask yourself when you're dealing with fair disappointment. It's really, really healthy. And it also strengthens a relationship. If I was disappointed in a friend and a friend turned around and said, you know what? I've thought about this. You're right. The reason you're disappointed is because I went against my word. I did this, I did that. I acknowledge it made you feel this way. I'm going to do better next time, and this is how I'm going to do better. I'm like, fucking legend. Very aware, knows what they're doing. I'll probably feel even closer to my friend if that was the outcome, okay? Now, The next one is weaponized disappointment. That's what we're dealing with here. We are dealing with weaponized disappointment because I don't want you to not give a fuck about the first disappointment I spoke about. That's important. This is what disappointment and guilt is for. It's so you can actually learn from your fucking mistakes. Weaponized disappointment is what I want to be focusing on. This is where people use disappointment, quote unquote, as a tool to manipulate you to get you to do what they want you to do. Okay? So for example, in an unhealthy relationship where your, partner will use disappointment of getting you to conform in a certain way, to dress a certain way, to behave a certain way because they want people to view you as an extension of them. So if they see something as appropriate or inappropriate, they look at you as a reflection of them. They try and mold you in a certain way. And if you try and break out of that mold, they're like, that's disappointing, or you disappointed me when you said that thing, or so they try and manipulate you through the lens of disappointment. It's very weaponized, okay? And you feel guilty because you always want to, you always want your partner to hold you in high esteem. And in unhealthy relationships, it's a really effective manipulation tactic. Now, another form of disappointment is parents, hugely parents, who want their child to have a certain career that fits in or follows the ideals of the fairy tale that they've created in their head for their child, whether it be career, whether it be, who they choose to marry, where they choose to live, where they choose to raise a family, how they choose to raise their children, all of that. Sometimes parents can get very ahead of themselves and start saying that they're disappointed in things that they have no right to even have any kind of control or, whatever over. So when we talk about people that use weaponized disappointment, I'm just going to talk about it as people that use it, but you could apply it to whatever you're dealing with in your life, whether it's your parents, whether it's your whoever the fuck is doing this to you, okay? But there'll be things like, what will people think of you? That's weaponized disappointment. They're trying to get you to feel like other people are going to think worse of you if you were to follow through with this thing. It's just that I care what other people think of you. It's very manipulative, okay? Saying to your partner, if you have, this is a really big one, let's say your partner cheats on you or is just a dud in the relationship and then you're the one that leaves, they say, just know that people are going to know that you're the one that gave up on this relationship. You're the one that whatever. So again, they're trying to put the disappointment of other people onto you so you stay in a relationship even though that they're the ones that have caused the cracks in the relationship. Saying things like, I thought you were different. I didn't realize this was you. I didn't, obviously. When they say you let me down on something that you hadn't agreed to prior. So different to what I spoke about when you make a promise, when you do agree, when someone just says, no, you let me down on something that you're like, that's not even in my character. That's not even you haven't even asked me to do that. I didn't even know that's what you expected from me. You're trying to basically force me to read your mind. I'm going to tell people that you did X, Y, Z, all of this shit, okay? So you got to start to ask yourself, how badly do I need this person or these people to think highly of me? At what cost? At what cost? Because if it's at the cost of you living a life that is a life that you want to live, making decisions for your own career or for where you want to live, then that's a very high cost. You've got to know what it costs you. Everything comes at a price. Everything comes at a price. And if you're going to let someone's disappointment dictate how you live your life, identify the price and say, am I willing to pay it? Because they're not paying it. It's all well and good for a parent to sit on their high horse, I want you to live your life, rah, rah, rah. But they're not the ones depressed, having to live in this, in a career that they don't want to live in, or forced to stay in a city because they feel that they're going to disappoint their parents if they move and experience life in another country for a year or two or longer. You're the one that has to live with it. So at what cost? Okay? Then say, if after this person gets over the initial shock of me telling them what I am going to do with my life or what I do want to do, or that I want to change something, if this person still cannot think highly of me after the fact, what does that mean about them and my relationship with them? Because you could say, oh, but they're old. My parents are old. They're set in their ways. They're this and that. Fuck off, okay? Because when it comes to loving someone, it's okay for someone to still not love your decision, but still love you. You can get to a point where let's say you want to move overseas, but you're like, oh my God, my parents would never, the whole family has lived in the same suburb, let alone the same city and country. They would just die. They would whatever. Okay, your aim isn't to get your parents to be thrilled about your decision, because then you'll never go. The aim is that you can get them to see it as much as possible from your perspective. There's a difference between them being sad that you're doing something because they're going to miss you versus you thinking that they're going to be disappointed in you and they're not going to accept you as a person. Because most parents can still be sad for selfish reasons because they love you and they want you nearby, but also acknowledge that it's something that's important to you. Another one is your parents not wanting you to date, not wanting you to be gay, okay? That grinds my gears, that one, because it's like ultimately, I could go on forever about that one. That's just fun. Anyway, but it's this idea that you are warping, they look at it as, not that you have any control over it, but you are significantly changing the idea that they had for you, and you're turning it upside down, and now they've got to come up with a whole brand new kind of fairy tale or imaginary life that they had for you, and you're the one that's going to destroy that. You're the one that's going to turn that around when you never told them, please come up with this imaginary concept of what you think my life is going to be like, right? But all these things, you've got to think at the end of the day, if my relationship with my parents or this person or this friend or whatever is healthy enough, we can still have a healthy relationship. The aim is not to get them to love what I do. At the end of the day, I can't control that outcome. The aim is to communicate it across to them, to be honest, to answer the questions whenever it's appropriate to answer their questions, because sometimes there's questions outrageous and it's not appropriate. But in general, to have an open communication about what it is that I'm doing. They don't have to love it, but I want them to understand whenever possible where I'm coming from, if possible, if they're open to it. Don't say my aim is to get them to agree, because if your aim is to get them to agree, they just can simply not agree, and then you're not going to take action on that thing, which is fucking bullshit, okay? So you've got to ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario if they walked away from me saying, I'm actually not going to do this thing, if they walked away, thinking the worst of you and telling everyone and spreading stories and whatever, whether they're friends or whatever. I can't imagine your parents spreading stories, but some parents are toxic. What is the worst case scenario? Because a lot of people, myself included, I remember there were times, twice in my life, I was in these really unhealthy relationships. And I remember saying to myself, like, we'd have really big fights, but the way that the fights would be spun was always like, somehow it'd always make me look really bad in the fight. It was how I, because I would snap, and like, the initial reason for the fight wasn't something that I had done necessarily wrong, but then how I ended up reacting because I was so frustrated. Maybe I yelled, maybe I name called, I just like lost my shit. And then it would turn around to be this thing of like, if I was to leave now, I would look like a psychopath. Now, in hindsight, I would much rather look like a quote unquote psycho that my ex tells other people, oh my God, she snapped at me, she blew up, she's crazy, and have my sanity and leave this person. But at the time I thought, no, I've got to mend this. Otherwise all these people are going to be disappointed in me. All these people are going to think that I'm crazy or that I'm this or that I'm that. So I would mend it. So I remember always thinking, I can't wait for an opportunity for this relationship to end where I can walk away with my image unscathed. And that's really unhealthy, because both times it held me in that relationship a lot longer. I knew I didn't want to, I knew deep down, as much as I loved them, but deep down, I knew I was looking for an out where I would not be, where my image wouldn't be dragged through the mud, okay? And that's not right. So you've got to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen? So your ex goes and tells people that you're a psycho. Okay, cool. The people he's telling that you're a psycho are obviously not that close to you, because anyone that's close to you is going to take that information with a grain of salt, being like, there's two sides to every story. We know this person quite well. you probably were just having an argument. They're not a psycho. Like if someone came up to me and told me Liv is a psycho, I would be like, well, you obviously just had a really negative interaction with her and you both got into a fight. Do you think I'm going to be like, oh my God, my best friend's a fucking psycho because this one person told me she's a psycho? You know, like the people that know you, okay? So what is the worst? We need to get over the fact that people are going to believe rumors about us, because if you live your life like tailoring it to avoid a rumor about you, you'll be miserable. You will be miserable, okay? And then ask yourself, is how they feel about my decision ultimately my responsibility? And the answer is no, it's not your responsibility. And if it's parents specifically that we're talking about, after you've, offered open communication around the topic and them still rejecting this idea of what you want, who is now responsible for their feelings? They are. You can say, look, I know you're still unhappy with what I've said. I'm here for mature adult conversations, but I'm just telling you what I'm doing. It's not about asking. It's not about getting your approval. We're all adults here. I'm just letting you know. And if you want to ask more questions, if you want to talk about it, yeah, I'm like, depending what questions they're asking, but yeah, ultimately, yes. But that's it. I'm not responsible for your feelings around this thing. Okay, you can still have a good relationship with someone and not agree on certain things, especially when it comes to things that you want to do with your life. Okay, you don't have to keep addressing something again and again or sweeping it under the rug where both parties are set on their ways. If your parents want to be set in a certain way, again, that's also ultimately up to them. It's not up to you to change them because you can't control them. So you also don't want to be like, well, my parents really want me to be a doctor and how do I get them to say? You don't have to get them to say fucking shit. You living your life will hopefully eventually get them there. But if they choose not to see it, that's their delusions and that's on them. Okay? Yeah, I feel like once it's been addressed, unless there's new content to bring to the table, you can just like proceed with your life. With this kind of like parental disappointment, you always have to realize that if someone has created a little movie in their head about you and your future and what they expect from you, that's on them. Like, congratulations for creating this animation, but that's not my problem, okay? It's your problem. You're not privy to this weird movie that they made in their head. Therefore, that's on them, okay? So to summarize this episode, after everything that I've spoken about, you've got to... Oh, I just smashed a light next to me. So to summarize this episode, basically, just because someone perceives something differently to you, it doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make your decision wrong. We all approach things differently in life. And I also don't want you to feel like, how do I get them to now say, no, we're not here to control other people. We're here to take control of our life. And there are going to be people along the way that are going to use weaponized disappointment and also fair disappointment, but in this case, we're talking about weaponized disappointment, to try and get you to fit into their life so they can control you. Everything's about control. But you've got to remind yourself, ultimately, we all want control. These people think that by controlling me, they'll be happier. And that's their belief. And whatever. But I know that that's not the truth. So as long as I can be in control of my life, I don't need to control other people agreeing with me or not. Okay? Everyone sees life through their own filter. Everybody. Okay? So if you're trying to perfectly curate how you are perceived, then you're playing a losing game and you're wasting a lot of time and you're going to be sitting in this fear reactive state always. Okay? It is not your job to curate how other people see you. You can only do so much based on your character, based on how you treat people, based on how you talk to people. But at the end of the day, people have to see you for who you are. Okay? And then a lot of them might not like it, might not agree, and that's okay. It's, because the flip side of that is you constantly living like, okay, do they like this about me? Do they like that? And then you just being miserable and unfulfilled and having no control over your life whatsoever. You have to let people misunderstand you. You have to be okay with people misunderstanding you, because if someone misunderstands you, it's like I said before, everyone sees life through their own filter and through their own lens. It is perfectly normal to not be able to align with a significant portion of the population. As long as we can still respect each other, and as long as we can be like, I don't really see how you came to that conclusion, but I also respect that you've had a different journey in your life to get you to that point, so that's fine. That's the main thing. But it is the most liberating thing you can do for yourself is to let someone misunderstand you. Not intentionally, obviously, but if you've had a conversation and they still don't get it, that's when you got to let it go. Then you got to ask yourself, what is my weight to carry in this situation? What is actually my responsibility and what is not my responsibility? Because you're going to shed a lot of this responsibility weight when you realize, well, I've been carrying the need to control other people's opinions of me so much that it's actually like blocked me from, saying what I want to say or doing or living or whatever, what I want to do. Okay. So it's not my weight to carry. If it was fair disappointment, that is your weight to carry because you want to mend a relationship when you've done something wrong. But if it's weaponized disappointment, it is not your weight to carry. Okay. That is all for today's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Good times. I will have a brain fact coming up, maybe in the next Monday ep, maybe in a couple of Monday eps, I don't know. But it's going to be about bonds and chemical bonds and stuff because I think I can come up with some really cool examples of like certain medications that we take. And anyway, really interesting stuff. So that's all. Love you guys so much. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate, review, and share the episode. And yes, as always, remember, be kind to yourself, be kind to your brain. Don't take shit from anyone, and especially don't take shit from yourself. Daka!